Support for WUWM podcast comes from Hop Harvest and Vine and Good Harvest Market in Milwaukee, part of One Destination, combining farm-to-table dining, local craft beers, and organic groceries under one roof. More at goodharvestmarket.com.
Lake Effect brings you conversations about what's happening in Milwaukee and the people, places, and organizations that shape the community. This is Lake Effect Spotlight from WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR.
Alice's Garden Urban Farm has been growing on Milwaukee's north side for over 50 years. It's built on land that marks the beginning of Wisconsin's Underground Railroad and named after Milwaukee's first Black executive director of Milwaukee County Extension. The farm is rooted in local Black culture and history. For our series on urban agriculture, WUWM's Eric Vaughn Fellow Maria Peralta-Arellano visited Alice's Garden to speak with its executive director, Venice Williams.
Alice's Garden Urban Farm is in its 53rd season. It came by way of a highway that was never built, and the displacement of the African American community who lived here. This neighborhood was Milwaukee's original Bronzeville neighborhood. And so once all of the land was cleared and the highway was not built, first Clarence and Cleopatra Johnson's Park was put in, which is right across 20th Street, and then the garden came to be. It was originally 3 acres, and now it's 2.2 acres. It was named Alice's Garden in the early 2000s after Alice Mead Taylor, who was the first African-American executive director of Milwaukee Cooperative Extension, who used to run this garden. She died suddenly at age 51, and the very next day the garden was named Alice's Garden.
So currently, what is the role of Alice's Garden in the community? We talked a little bit about it on our short walk here, and there are several things that are going on around us. So just walk me through what it means to be here.
I like to say that we use gardening as the carrot, pun intended, to get people to come through the gates to impact positively their entire quality of life. So obviously we're cultivating food here, we're growing herbs and vegetables and fruits, but we're also growing people, and we're growing families, and we're growing healthy wellness traditions, and we are asking people to go deep into their ancestral memory, deep into their DNA, and to reclaim some of those nourishing traditions of their ancestors related to food, related to cooking, and related to being human together.
While I was reading through your guys' missions and things like that, there's a part of it where it talks about reclaiming the culture that surrounds urban farming and gardening. So can you kind of walk me through that? What culture is tied to those things, and why does it need to be reclaimed?
For us specifically, as folks of African American heritage whose indigenous roots go all the way back to Africa, we are clear and unapologetic about the truth that the wealth of this nation was built on our ancestors' back and our indigenous native ancestors' backs, that our ability to grow food is what grew the wealth of this nation. And yet over the years, food and land has been and continues to be weaponized against brown and Black people. So part of my role, part of my responsibility as one of the caretakers of this land is to help Black folks to understand that the shame of that period of enslavement is not ours to carry. That our ancestors, even though they were enslaved, were incredibly healthy people over the years because they grew their own food, and that growing your own food is one of the most powerful things you can do. You control your physical and your spiritual wellness. And so helping people of African descent in this country to understand that we deserve land and good soil to cultivate our own food, and there is nothing to be ashamed about with that, and we should not be running from that.
How in Alice's garden is culture preserved, but also how is it developed?
So culture is preserved by celebrating our food traditions, celebrating that tasty green tomato, whether we're breading it and frying it, or whether we're sauteing it for another dish. Taking those foodstuffs, the okra. A few years ago, I cultivated 14 different varieties of okra right here in this field. And of course, most people are like, what do you mean 14 different varieties of okra? But what it did as we cultivated it, as we shared recipes, it helped those who were engaged to remember. Food helps us to remember. And so people started to tell the stories of their great-grandma's gumbo and what it meant to be at a table, to be in that kitchen, to grow pinto beans and black-eyed peas, and to understand that it's not just about the cultivating of food, but who we have been, continue to be, and need to be more often as we sit at a table and share those foodstuffs from our ancestral lands, and not forget the struggle that so many went through so that we can have such a place and be together and live well.
So what do you think people often miss from the conversation when it comes to marginalized groups and getting back into gardening or farming spaces?
One of the things that people miss is, and again, I can only speak for Black folks, we never stopped growing our own food. So when I hear people talk about teaching African Americans to farm again, what are you talking about? We've never stopped growing our own food. We've never stopped feeding each other. We've never stopped sharing food and recipes and food stories. We are at a moment where we are inviting younger generations whose family members may have been disconnected in some way to come back to the fields again. It's not, for me, just about coming back to the food, but coming back to the fields. Soil is an incredible antidepressant. When you are farming and gardening and your hand is touching the soil and you are looking at and learning how to live with your other siblings in creation, the insects, the birds, your soul becomes transformed. You become a better human when you connect with the earth. That's part of what people are missing. It's not just about the cultivating of food. It's also about how soil grows you.
For the people who gather at Alice's garden, what do you think people love the most about here when it comes to what it contributes to the community?
Everyone who comes through these gates come for different reasons. I say the padlock on the gate is the biggest joke in the city of Milwaukee. There are like 200 keys to that lock. Everyone has their own key, and yet the system works. I always say I am the key maker, not the gatekeeper. And so my responsibility is to help provide space for people for whatever reason they are coming here. So whether they are Nancy and Stephan, whose garden is right here, and their main joy is the cultivation of flowers, and that's fine. Whether it is Ning, who cultivates all kinds of herbs and greens, and she goes and she sells at the West Dallas Farmers Market. Whether it is Beatrice, who cultivates herbs for her herbal business, or Ruth, who grows herbs and flowers for her soap making business. There are people who come into the garden and no one else may never see them because they make sure they come in the early morning hours because they just want to garden in solitude. They don't want to see the other humans, and that's fine too. Or the people who just come through the gate only for programming. There are people who only come in here year after year for a yoga class, right? Or for a cooking class, or they're coming for a boys' reading circle. So there is a palette of learning and engagement for everyone here in this space.
So one last thing I want to ask you is, when we're talking about urban growing spaces or gardens or farms such as this, what do you think, or what do you wish people in Milwaukee knew about these kinds of places?
It's sanctuary. That Alice's Garden and so many other spaces are the city's sanctuary. These are our safe spaces. You should not have to leave an urban context to find peace, to find serenity, to find yourself. You shouldn't have to retreat from the city to honor your own spirit and nourish your own soul. Community gardens and urban farms who understand the history and the need offer spaces to do that very well. Whether it is the elder who just comes and sits under that elderberry bush on that bench 2 times a week. That's all she does. But she has a key to do that. Sanctuary, peace, and connection. That's what the power of an urban farm can bring. That's the beauty that it can bring to folks' lives.
So what is the place of community gardens or urban farms or Alice's Garden as a educational center?
I always say that everything we need to learn in life, we can learn from the natural world. So we can learn so much about living together by understanding companion planting, right? We can learn about reciprocity as we study what it means to rotate crops and to not just continue to take from the soil, but to farm in a way where you give back. Well, we can learn, that's what we need to be doing. We're here to both give and take. We can learn from that pesky red-winged blackbird who is probably the best parent and father on the planet as he protects his young, what it means to go out and do whatever you need to do to protect your children, right? We can learn from the morning glory that there's a time to bloom and there's a time to rest. It doesn't bloom all day long. So we can point to all the different plants out here, all the creatures out here, and there is something that they can teach us about our own life journey. So there's that kind of learning. But then we use this as an outdoor classroom as well. So we have reading circles, we have a poetry reading circle, we have an environmental reading circle. And notice I don't say book club. So we pause and we read aloud to one another out here. And if it takes us 6 months to go through a book, then it takes us 6 months. Obviously, we're not out here for 6 months. We move indoors. But our poetry books, so it takes us a month or so to read a collection of poetry. Part of the education of this space is the importance of slowing down and pausing and fully seeing yourself and one another.
Venice Williams is the executive director of Alice's Garden Urban Farm. She spoke with WUWM's Eric Vaughn Fellow Maria Peralta-Arellano for her series on urban agriculture called Feeding the City, the People Powering Local Food. You can find more of Maria's reporting on this series at WUWM.com.
You can find more interviews like this one by visiting WUWM.com/Lake Effect. And while you're there, subscribe to the Lake Effect Spotlight podcast.